In the first half of 2022, we saw a lot of excitement when it comes to union organizing in the United States. Workers in close to 200 Starbucks stores have actually voted to unionize. Not only that, but the very first Amazon warehouse in the United States saw a successful unionization vote by thousands of workers. But now, the hard part starts. Under United States labor law, workers actually don't have a union officially until they win their first contract. Cornell researchers have determined that 12 months after workers vote to unionize, 52% of them don't have a contract. There's a big significance to this. At the 12-month mark, something happens under US labor law. Employers can inspire workers to form a committee to call for a decertification election, to throw the union out. That can't happen for a 12-month period. So that 52% number is really significant. There's a reason that a year after workers vote to unionize, 52% of them do not have an agreement in hand. And that's because US labor law, sadly, permits union busters. These are official, they're called union avoidance firms. Union busters come in, are hired and paid millions of dollars to destroy worker solidarity, come up with a million reasons, lawsuits, delay tactics, filing charges, so that workers actually don't even get to the negotiations table at all. I'm going to counterpose what most national unions do when they're approaching negotiations in the United States with a better, more effective approach to workers winning not just a contract within 12 months, but actually really good contracts, the kind that will inspire other workers to take the risk to form a union themselves. There are three principles that I want to talk about. The first is transparent, the second is big, and the third is open. So let me start with the first one. Transparent negotiations. The typical union approach is actually one where unions, often with their lawyers, will enter a room and sign on to something called ground rules. And under the ground rules, one of the most important ones for the employer is what's called gag rules or a gag order. This is one of the most typical features, and it's very problematic. A gag rule essentially means that the union agrees with the employer in a signed agreement before the negotiations even get started that they will not talk about what's happening in the negotiations, either with the media or the general public, or of most concern, even with the workers whose negotiations are taking place. So that's a typical union. And what's fascinating is most people, most workers, believe that that's a mandatory approach to negotiations. Ground rules, under which gag orders fall, are a voluntary or non-mandatory subject of bargaining. That's it. That's concept one. Second concept, big. What do we mean by big? We're talking about the size of the union negotiating committee. In a typical union, committees are paid, appointed, and small. In a bottom-up grassroots approach to negotiations, that's a power-building approach to negotiations, the complete opposite approach is taken. The committee will be voluntary, elected, and large. And when I say large, I mean large and representative, so that every single kind of worker covered by the contract is actually present in the room itself when the negotiations are taking place. And in something like a hospital, there are hundreds of different kinds of workers who do different kinds of jobs. So, big means big negotiations with big committees with all different kinds of workers in the room. And a fundamental difference is that they are voluntary. Workers are not being paid. Basically, you can't really say to the employer, we want everyone to be paid, and we're going to bring 300 people in the room. Workers win more when they have a big committee, and they win contracts faster. So that's big. Third concept is open, and I literally mean open negotiations. So in a typical union, the idea that any worker represented by the contract who is going through negotiations has the right to walk in the room is literally absolutely no way. Like most union leaders will just say, no way. They can't even imagine letting all the workers come in the room. The bottom-up grassroots approach, completely the opposite. Our approach is that actually every worker should have the right to be in the room, not talking, not being disruptive, but in the room, quietly, observing the contract negotiations that are going to affect their lives directly, intimately, and intensely for the next several years. Why would we deny American workers the right to actually sit as legal equals to their employer and be able to respectfully challenge the rulemaking that goes on in their workplace? The employers in the negotiations context can exhibit incredibly bad behavior. So when a skeptical worker has the right to walk in the room and actually experience a bunch of their coworkers making a really good, rational, logical argument about why a workplace should work in a certain way, and then they get to watch the employer fighting with the people across the table on the union side about why they shouldn't spend that kind of money or why they shouldn't do that, whatever it is, open up scheduling in a way that's going to make more sense for single moms, for example, or give childcare to mothers so they can do different kind of things when they come to work. It's a pretty radicalizing experience for a worker who may have once been skeptical about the union. So just to wrap this up, there are 3 principles or 3 concepts. The first concept is transparent, the second concept is big, and the third concept is open. That is how American workers can win great contracts.